So yeah, the Unity package is up here if you want to download it and kind of like pull it into Unity. Today's class is a Blender class, Blender for beginners. So we're going to be making this die and this pawn here. Our end result should look something like this. We got basically a very simple script that will kind of randomly roll the die, and it'll tell you which result you kind of get. So in the Unity package, there's that little script that I wrote and kind of this nice shiny environment that you could kind of play around in. And then hopefully, you know, the 3D that you make, you pull it in, it'll look nice and shiny and reflecting on the floor and stuff. And it's all possible in Unity and pretty simple to do. But yeah. If you brought a mouse, that's great. I know I should have recommended that people bring a mouse, but then at the same time I knew we wouldn't have enough tables for everyone. So the class today, I will be showing like tips and tricks on using just a trackpad. It's not ideal. It's a little bit slower definitely than using a mouse, but I know, like, you know, some people might not have a table or whatever, and this is like a just kind of a beginner intro, and I think it's important to just get the basics. Like when you see that you could start cutting up some of these objects and manipulating them and creating them, it could you know, show you that this stuff is approachable, it's doable, and then, you know, you could really take it from there. There's so many tutorials online on how to do Blender and stuff, but hopefully I can bring it today in like an approachable way. So over here, I'm actually gonna add my face in there because that's tradition. There we go. Okay. Here's my seat. Okay. So we'll give people a few more minutes to get settled in, but yeah, all you should really have is, you know, the latest version of Unity. If it's not like the latest, it's, you know, not a big deal. And Blender, I have version 2.79 right now. If there's a newer one since then, or if you have, again, a slightly older one or whatever, it's not a big deal. The features should all be kind of the same. But yeah, this is what Blender looks like. Kind of starts you off with the cube. So yeah, while people are still kind of getting settled in and stuff, I could kind of just, you know, talk a little bit about the cube. I find it really interesting about Blender. I originally started with 3D Studio Max, and that's, you know, Maya is in that realm, and I've done ZBrush and stuff, but Blender has always been this kind of unapproachable, unattainable, like, what is this? But I know it's like there's a lot going on in Blender, and it's a big program, but, you know, it's so hard and it looks so different and stuff. And the reason Blender is so scary to a lot of people, especially people that come from Maya and 3D Max, is that the interface is just so different. I mean, it really looks completely different from everything else. And one of the first things that people notice when they go into Blender is they can't click anything. They start clicking and they're like, why can't I select anything? And all you're doing is you're moving around this cursor, and it's like, what is going on with this? And then you just close it, like, I'm done. I don't want to do Blender anymore. But the thing about it is that to select things, it's actually not left click, it's right click, right? Weird, but it's kind of how it is. But I know, like, that was a huge turn off for me when I first started playing with Blender, and I was like, why can't I click anything? No, this won't do. This won't do. But, you know, if you go a little deeper and you watch the tutorials and there's someone doing a beginner tutorial and tells you, yeah, you gotta right click to select things, you would know. But yeah, so, you know, just get settled in, turn on your computer, check it out. If you don't have a mouse, it's cool. We're gonna do like a you know, as touchpad friendly as we could do today for this. So if you're already loaded up and you have your computer opened and Blender opened and you do not have a mouse, I am gonna want you to go in to over here on the top left, this file and user preferences, to open up like the options menu. So just file and user preferences. And Blender has a lot of add-ons already kind of built into it, but also pretty easy to download. So you can actually click here, and we're in the user preferences to add-ons. And again, this is for trackpad users. And you're gonna search for 3D like navigation. I think that's the one. And just check it on. And what that's basically gonna do, it's gonna give you some quick and useful shortcuts for navigating around the viewport, looking from top, left, right, and stuff, without having to use like a full-sized keyboard and a mouse. It just makes things a lot easier, and I'll kind of explain how that works. For everyone else, that even if you do have a mouse, it's not a big deal to turn this on. It basically will just turn on this window right here called display. Will pop in, but we'll kind of get into that when I kind of start breaking down this interface a little bit. So yeah, just file, user preferences, add-ons, and then in the search bar start typing 3D nav, and there it is. Yes? I thought you were raising your hand. It's cool. Yeah, if you do have a question or you're stuck or something, raise your hand. We might have someone come around and help you out, or I'll try to answer any question you may have. So yeah, I mean, basically with Blender open, I'll kind of break down this interface. So if you have a mouse, the way that you rotate around the viewport is by clicking down your mouse wheel. So that should be like your third mouse button, which is kind of like the middle mouse wheel, by clicking it down. If you do not, your trackpad, if you're on a Mac, should be able to kind of, with two fingers, you should be able to look around. Now if you're on a Windows trackpad, which is, I'd say, probably the third tier of usability, but it's okay. That's why we turned on this interface over here. On the left, if you already turned on that add-ons, here on the left bottom, like kind of like folder tab, it should say display, and then there you should be able to click like front, back, left, right, top, bottom, and etc. And then if you want to like move around in a very specific spot, at least, I mean, I've tried this with my Windows trackpad. It at least does this like two-finger scroll thing. So if you can do that at least, like, then what you could do is you could scroll out and you can left click this 3D cursor around, and then you could see right here where it says cursor, you could center your view on the cursor, which can, help you navigate pretty solidly around. Now this is literally like the fallback method. Again, I recommend you use a mouse for when you're doing like 3D modeling, but since we don't have enough tables today, and I figured not everyone might have a mouse with them today and stuff, I made sure to prepare for that and have you guys covered in case you don't. So at first, just kind of get used to navigating around this environment a little bit. Everyone should kind of start with this basic cube. Blender's kind of interesting that it just starts with the cube. It's kind of like 3D modeler tradition, I think. A lot of 3D models start from a cube and then work from there. You cut it, you shape it, you move it around. Other 3D programs will just kind of start empty, but Blender kind of just starts with the default cube. Now all this you could change. You could change your default start, but this is just kind of like what everyone should have right now. So yeah, just get kind of used to navigating around a little bit. Again, if you don't have the middle mouse or your trackpad doesn't do that, kind of take a look at some of these other functions here. But basically, I'm going to kind of go ahead and just start explaining a little bit about this interface. So a lot of things in Blender aren't like just all the tools kind of like laid out in a menu somewhere. A lot of them are, but most things in Blender are kind of accessed through keyboard shortcuts. So the first thing that I explained earlier was to select something. it's just right click. So if you want to select this light, this lamp, you'll notice here, it's kind of similar to Unity. On the right here, the lamp gets highlighted. If you right click the cube gets highlighted. On the right here, you could almost kind of call this the inspector, or whatever, but in reality this is actually called the outliner in Blender. So whatever you kind of have selected here will be selected on the right here, and vice versa. If you select something in the outliner, it will get selected in the viewport. So the first thing that you notice when you select something is it gets these, red, blue, green arrows, just your typical, probably seen it before in Unity and stuff, the 3 axes. So yeah, you can pull on those with left click. So if you just drag by the arrow, make sure you don't drag by the middle. I don't know what that sound is, but if you do drag by the middle, it'll kind of go in every direction and you might not have the full control that you want. It's good practice to drag by the individual arrows. And this is after you have right-clicked your object to select it. So just kind of go ahead and do that. Now, someone might ask, how do you rotate, and then you're going to look, where's the rotate tool? Where's the rotate tool? Because, Unity just has a rotate tool. Well, you're probably going to have a lot of trouble finding the rotate button. But good thing is, in Blender, all you could do is press R on your keyboard and you enter rotation mode. Now, you'll notice that your rotation is fully just in every axis and you're just like, oh my god, what am I doing? So, you could just freely click and then just Control Z or Command Z to undo. It's just like every other 3D program. You can undo stuff. So the way that Blender works is, again, like I said, keyboard shortcuts, right? Keep in mind. They designed it in a very specific way. It's probably different if you're used to, doing Maya or 3D Max. But there's a reason why they did it like this, and Blender has been around for many, many years, and it's been doing quite well on its own kind of system, but it's different. So if you want to rotate just in a specific axis, like if I want to rotate in the Z right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press R, and then without touching anything yet, I'm going to press Z, and now you see I locked it. You see the blue line just goes right through it, and now I could rotate it around the Z. Now that might not be precise enough because you might want to rotate by a certain amount of degrees, so then you type in 4, 5 for 45, and you just rotated 45 degrees in Z. So again, if you want to rotate this 45 degrees in Z, you press R, then you press Z, and then you type 4, 5, and then you click, and then you did it, and it's exact. Now this might seem a little bit like, oh man, I'm already a little overwhelmed with this, but trust me, it's just a matter of getting used to it, and it's a habit thing. When I'm doing this, I'm like, going, and it's super fast, and you can kind of get used to it too. It's pretty intuitive once you get used to it. Same goes for movement. Now I taught you how to do movement by dragging the arrow keys, but the shortcut for moving is G. So you press G and you're moving. Now again, you'll notice that you're moving in every direction, which you might not want to do. So if you want to just move in one direction, you press G, and then let's say you want to move in the Z axis, and then you press Z, and now you're moving only in Z. If you want to move a certain amount, you say 10, which is probably too much. I flew out of my screen. So GZ2. So if you, yeah, so you kind of like almost just don't touch it until you put your command. Because yeah, if you do, once you click G, you go into movement mode, and your mouse will kind of be active. So it takes a little bit of discipline with that. So basically, it would just be G, Z, and then you move your mouse. So these are like just the basic, move and rotate, and then we have one more, and that should cover like just the basic navigation, and that's scale. Now, can you guess what key it is for scale?
S.
S, right? So you press S for scale, and you drag the mouse in and out, and you're scaling. So most of Blender is like that. It's keyboard shortcuts, and once you know the keyboard shortcuts, you're really fast with iterating and designing stuff in 3D. But for beginners, it does take a little bit of time to get acclimated to the keyboard shortcuts. So I'll tell you what I did as a beginner was I went online and I Googled something like Blender keyboard shortcuts, and then there's a nice like JPEG with all the keyboard shortcuts. I printed it, put it right next to my desk, and you know that's when you're in that mode. Like, I want to learn Blender. I want to spend the next week learning Blender. You have the keyboard shortcuts up there taped, and you will learn it. Just like anything else, it's a matter of habit, it's a matter of practice. So just to review, G for move, R for rotate, S for scale. And S is the same way. Like, if you want to scale it and make it twice its size, press S, then you press 2, and then you click, and that makes it double sized. If you want to make it half sized, what do? Press S, and then you do 0.5, and that makes it half its size. So that pretty much can kind of cover our cube here. Now, if your cube ever gets lost, or you know it's off screen or something, there is over here on the right, you can see a little plus icon here. If you just click that, it'll open this little screen here. Now, everything in Blender, like in most like professional programs nowadays, the whole interface is adjustable. So you could resize things, you can add a window, remove a window, etc. So on the right side here, you have the actual location, rotation, and scale of the object. So I can just make that like 0, 0, 0, and then I can make my cube go back to 0. So again, that's right here on the right. That's almost kind of like your object settings and stuff. And if you have another weird rotation or something, you can go ahead and change that. But it shouldn't be a big deal right now. So what we're going to do with this cube, and I thought, dice would be a perfect example for a cube. We're going to have a similar result to this in the end. We're going to have a little Unity project, which basically you roll the dice. Keeps like landing on the same phase. I need to make this even more random of a spin. You'd imagine, and after a spin like that, there we go. 5, see? So it'll be a little bit of functionality there as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a fully fleshed out prefab for Unity for use in a game engine. I mean, honestly, you could use it in Unreal too if you want or whatever. There really isn't, you're not really restricted to Unity. It's 3D modeling, so you could kind of go for anything. You could even use it in After Effects and in pretty much anything else. So you could 3D print it. You could do whatever you want. 3D modeling is 3D modeling. It doesn't care where you're going to use it. But today we're going to use it in Unity because, this is Unity education, and, people have been asking for a Blender class. Every now and then I'll do some Unity and then I'll pop into Blender like, wait, let me just model something real quick. People are like, whoa. When are you going to teach us that? So today is the first Blender class. And hopefully I'll be able to break this down in a simple way. So far in Blender, we've just been moving around in what's called object mode. So object mode is right here on the bottom. Now, if you don't see the projector's bottom, I'll just kind of move up the screen here a little bit so you can see there's object mode right here. So object mode is for taking the actual object, moving it, scaling it. But if we want to edit this cube, we're going to go into something called edit mode. So you're going to click right here where it says object mode, and you're going to go, instead of object mode, you're going to go to edit mode. And when you go to edit mode, now you should see something like this. You're going to see that the individual points of the cube and stuff now become accessible and editable. So just to kind of show you a little bit how this works. Now, you don't have to follow along this part because you just might mess up your cube, and but you can always undo if you do something. You can actually grab the individual points. So again, to select things, I know this will take a little getting used to because left click is usually select. It's right click. So if you right click one of these, like what's called vertices that make up the cube, and then you could also move those and basically change the shape of this cube. To select multiple things, you shift select. So shift right click. So you could shift right click like the 4 top vertices, for example, and kind of make it a shape like this. Now, again, like if you're on a mouse and you want to pan the camera around, you hold shift and middle mouse or the mouse wheel. If you're not on a mouse, what's up? What is it? If you're not on a mouse, you should be able to just shift and use the trackpad to pan around. That works pretty well on Mac, but you should be able to also go, in and out around to kind of pan the camera. Now, again, if you're kind of on a clunky like Windows trackpad, you might have to use our on the left side our display options here and kind of use just left click to move what's called a 3D cursor and then center your view around that. So that's definitely another way to do it. So I'm just gonna undo these vertices that I just moved, and I'm gonna make it back to my original cube. Now, to make a die, what we have to do is basically cut up this cube into, I'd say, like 6 sections, because the highest number on a die is the number 6. So we kind of have to have 6 evenly cuts basically to kind of make these things. So in 3D, to make a cut around an object, it's something called an edge loop. So you could just cut the object somewhere, but we actually want to cut it evenly around its perimeter, or its its surface or whatever. You guys get what I mean. So in order to do that, again, in edit mode, just where we were just now, you're going to kind of hover your cursor over the area where you want to cut, and you're going to do Control R. And you're going to see this purple line comes up. Now, to increase the amount of lines, now without clicking, because if you click, the cut gets made, and then you could cut and move stuff around, but don't follow what I just did. Again, just Control R, so you can always undo if you make a mistake and you want to come back. So just Control R, it should be purple like this without clicking anything. And now you can use the scroll wheel, or you could use your trackpad to scroll up and down, just like you're scrolling on a browser, to increase the amount of cuts. See that? So right there on the bottom left, it should say number of cuts 6. So all I'm doing is, and then I'm clicking. And then I'm clicking again, because if you don't click the second time, see, it lets you adjust the cuts. So you can kind of make the cuts like in the middle if you want. So I'm just going to undo and show you again. So you kind of hover your cursor over it, Control R, and then scroll upwards to increase the number of cuts to 6. Then click, yes.
How do you change
The direction of the cut. So don't worry if you got it like horizontal, because we will be making cuts in the horizontal as well. But basically, if you want to make a horizontal cut, you should hover your cursor over kind of that edge. You see that? So if I want to cut like vertically, I kind of put my cursor on this part and it cuts there. If I want to cut horizontally, I kind of put my cursor here and it cuts in that direction. And see, if I just have Control R and I move my cursor around, it will kind of move the cut around to where you want it. So Control R, scroll 6 cuts, and click. And then click again to place the cuts where you want them. Now we're going to do the same thing horizontally. So we're going to do Control R. We're going to find where our cut is supposed to go. And we're going to use our scroll to make 6 cuts. And then we're going to click. Boom. If you made a mistake, that's okay. You could always just do Control Z, and it will just put you right back into an undo.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So either by just like clicking something else, like another vertice or something. So yeah, now you're gonna want to rotate your camera. Now, again, if you're like on like the worst trackpad that doesn't seem to be able to rotate on the trackpad, you could use the view right here and kind of rotate it until you get to a part that's not cut. There we go. Like my front hasn't been cut. So we're gonna have basically cuts in every direction is what we're going for. So I'm gonna Control R here, 6 cuts, and voila. Now we have cube that's basically cut into 6 slices, all in every direction, pretty much. Now, for those that are following along the tutorial, I'm just kind of gonna come along and just see what you guys are doing, and hopefully explain some stuff if anyone's stuck. But you want to help me out? If anyone's a little stuck or something, feel free to raise your hand.
How do I get? I'm trying to guess it.
So let's actually get ourselves to undo. So Command Z. And so now do again Command R. Sorry, is it Control R? Yeah, Control R. You don't have to. Yeah, just do Control R to go into the edge loop mode. And then take your mouse and just hover it over the cube. Yep. Now click once. And then, oh wait, sorry, wasn't doing my bad. Click on the Yes, sir. Yeah, Control R again, without clicking, and now scroll up till you get to 6. So just, it should say there. So just keep scrolling, and you'll see the cuts increase.
I can't figure out how to zoom in.
Scroll up.
There I am trying to play around with something that's tiny. I know, where would I be with that? Okay, I think I'm good. I've got everything.
Wait, there it is. Oh, it's oops. Yeah, so
how do
some
I
people might have a backwards scroll. So if you need, if the cuts aren't like increasing, maybe your scroll is in the other direction. So that happens sometimes. So yeah, so Control R, and then scroll downwards this time. So you get 6. Now without clicking, you get to 6, right?
He's not got any of them selected.
4, 5, 6. Yeah. And now very gently click, and then click again without moving the mouse. So just click the left mouse button, and then kind of center it, and then click again. So, and then you can always move it again just by using this move tool, because you already have these selected.
So they're all selected. Oh, now I
They're already
understand.
selected. And then now you can do the same thing in the other direction as well.
Where it's like, if I want just like one of them, like is there
So we'll get to that, yeah.
I just want to know how you deselect it once you got here.
So, I'm not really deselecting, I'm just kind of selecting one of the vertices. So you can just right click one of the dots. Like right click like any of the dots that are kind of apparent somewhere, like one of these dots. I can just right click it. Right click it.
I'm not
Just
sure
like
how
one of
you-
these kind of like verts.
Oh.
So you can undo that, yeah. So right click.
See, right clicking with this mouse isn't that simple.
Oh, I see. Well then, what about in here? Can you right click with, what is it like? How do you typically right click?
I don't usually, I usually have a big like,
So what you
How
can
do you
do,
right-
Right in there and just click on one of the vertices.
yeah, it's just, she doesn't, her right click isn't binded.
Yeah.
So what you can do is you can go into the, the mouse setting, whatever it's called. It's, what's the trackpad settings on the Mac so you can bind? Is it trackpad? Yeah, trackpad.
yeah.
And right here, so secondary click is click with 2 fingers for you. So what would be good is to bind it to something else, but you could, I think if you just click with 2 fingers, you should do it. Nope.
No,
Let's see
I
here.
don't think that's it.
So what we can always do is, oops. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So secondary click, we're gonna make it bottom right corner of your keyboard, of this. So now this right side should be a right click. You see that?
Right, okay.
So
I just don't have a right click with this.
yeah, it's cool.
Set up,
It's cool.
so-
It's Mac users typically don't. So yeah, that's a good thing to do. Is to bind
Bind.
the bottom right side of your touchpad as a right click.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yep.
Very cool.
So this is the important part because it's just the basic modeling stuff. But then you're gonna see how this turns into a cube fairly easily. Nice dice.
So control plus and minus.
Yep, pinch to zoom, or you should be able to just if you got a MacBook Pro and stuff, the trackpad should be pretty intuitive. The mouse is you might need a better mouse for 3D modeling. Typically like a 2-click mouse with the scroll. Yeah, I mean that could work, but you definitely want a mouse with two buttons at least. Stuff, but typically like on this kind of trackpad, this works pretty great. So then you go to hold shift to pan around, and then you can completely navigate. Yeah, that mouse is not so good for 3D modeling.
I do this on my lap.
No,
So
I definitely would grab the table. Aren't you? Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah, I want this. That's how I wanted to get the order. Yeah, right in front. You can like don't get eye contact with the guy if you're getting stuck in the There was good pizza. It wasn't meant for this week. Now I'm not coming to dinner because I'm fasting. For the sake of that. Oh, he's a kid. He's not very old at all. That die. That die is so perfect. I'm liking this. I'm glad we did this because I would never have figured most of this out. Like you said, I would have gone, shit, what's that? I'm not bother with that. I'm just going to stick to you.
I got to the menu, open it out. I was
All right, cool. Everyone seems to have gotten the hang of this part. Honestly, this is like one of the trickier parts for a beginner to get. I mean, pretty much if you're able to cut this cube in 6 axes in each direction, you're already pretty much halfway there. You're kind of getting the navigation and kind of how it works. So now what we want to do is we want to kind of make the actual indents of this, die. So let's start with the 6. So on the top of our die, I want you to now, instead of selecting, see how we're selecting what's called vertices, what's the points? We don't want to select the points, we want to select faces. So we want to select the whole like quad. So the way that you do that is here on the bottom of the program, you have vertices, edges, and faces. So you see that right there? Let me know if you don't. But it's like a little, right here towards the middle, bottom of the bar, there's like one icon that has a dot, one icon that has like an orange line, and one that has the orange like whole quad selected. So select the one that's to select quads. And now when you right click, see now you're selecting entire quads. See that? So now what we want to do is we want to right click like this one, this one, this one. Oh, shift right click here, 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 and here. And that'll give us 6. Now, I'm just going to Google like a dice reference just so you can see. So different dice have different designs. You have dice that kind of have the 6 kind of close together. You have dice that kind of has the 6 kind of far apart like this one does. It really depends on what kind of dice you want to make. I guess today we're making the far apart type. So I mean, it just is what it is, kind of. But if you did want to make like the close together 6, you could technically select like this, you know, if you wanted to. It really is up to you. But I'm gonna kind of do these separate right here like that. So just shift right click, pop, 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 and there we go.
Shift right click.
So shift.
With right click and this bottom corner is not working. So if I hold.
Oh no, this shift, that shift.
Yeah, but they're both shift.
Try this one.
It's just I can't do it. No.
Try with 2 hands, yeah. Yeah, it's the left shift.
Okay. I haven't got enough squares.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, I haven't got enough of that.
You can make it, but I don't think by default it doesn't have a shortcut. But typically when you hover over things, it'll tell you if it does. But
I don't have
default Blender bindings don't have like a shortcut for it. But typically you're not really switching between faces and verts like that often to have a. But you can bind pretty much anything in Blender to some keyboard shortcuts. There might be one, I just don't know it. But yeah, this is one of the few things that actually is like in the UI. So yeah, having faces selected like this. Now, once you have your face selection the way you want it, now we want to like kind of bring it in. So that's called extruding. Now to extrude, guess what key it is? It's E. So you press E, and then you'll see when you move your mouse, it's extending it out and it's pushing it in, right? You see that? So what we want to do is just push it in slightly. Don't worry too much about precision today. This is just kind of for fun. So just kind of push it in a little bit. Once you're happy, then just left click and you got it. So the important thing about modeling dice, I didn't know this before I tried to model a die. There's actually rules to how a dice is laid out. The opposite numbers have to add up to 7. So if we got 6 on the top, we got 1 on the bottom. And that's kind of how it works.
That's exactly what happened. I've got 6 of everything, so 6 doesn't fit. So if I was to go back and
you got you were supposed to make 6 cuts.
Yeah,
so
I thought I had to make 6.
If it happens, it's not a big deal. We'll see if we can
I'll just make a dice that only goes up to 4.
Dude. Well, you know, like
Yeah, I get the idea. I know
yeah. You can make it kind of a funky dice, and you can put like another 2 in like
In
some
a
other
weird
places, you know.
place.
Yeah, why not? You
Yeah,
know,
I don't
like why
that.
not? Yeah.
Looks
It is what it is, you know. Like life gives you lemons, you make lemonade.
Yes,
It gives you
exactly.
4-sided die, you make it work somehow.
What you got?
So yeah, so basically if you got 6 on the top, we're gonna scroll over to the bottom, and then we're just gonna grab the one in the middle and make 1. And then we're just gonna extrude that upwards like that. So now you can guess where this goes, and you can kind of take it from there and do the rest of the sides. You could do 4. And then on the other side, what adds up to 7 is 3. And then 3 kind of looks like this, right? So I got 6, I got 1, I got 4, I got 3, I need 5, right? So I'm going to do 5. 5 kind of looks like this, right? It's kind of got this crisscross 5 design. And then opposite of 5 is 2. Now 2, yeah, it's like this, right? So we're going to do it like that. So this is our basic kind of layout of the die. Now just kind of go ahead and kind of do this. Lay out your die, push those in, and then the next part that we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to smooth this all, how to make it look nice and polished, like a real nice die, and not like something from a retro like 80s like like 3D model or stuff. We're gonna make it look nice and smooth and polished. Yeah, again, like, feel free to raise your hand or whatever if you get stuck on any of these parts. But again, the command is extrude, and that's you select, you press E to extrude, and you're extruding. And then once you're happy with it, you click. And if you at any point you go wrong, you can always undo. You can Control Z or you can Command Z.
How do you deselect one of your faces?
You kind of don't. You just select something else. Yeah, like the way that you deselect, this is kind of, I guess, a little bit more of an advanced thing, is you Control Shift, and then you could kind of use this lasso tool to just deselect a bunch of things. Or you could select a bunch of things by holding Control and using the lasso tool. And see, the lasso tool lets you kind of select a bunch of things, and then you can also Control Shift and deselect a bunch of things. But this isn't really for today's tutorial. But again, like if you want to know how that works, it's kind of like that.
I'm trying to get the perspective. Like,
Yep.
you can't get it off the top.
Let's see here. So you should be able to
You
just
see
use
how
the
my
middle mouse
extrude is on an angle here?
and just hold the middle
And
mouse.
this
and
particular
then
one that
pick
doesn't
Yeah,
right.
so just the middle mouse, you hold it, and you kind of pan around the camera like that. Yep.
I've got a weird extrude going on.
What's going
Like
on here?
because I'm on an angle, it looks like when it's coming out at an angle.
Oh, why is it doing that? Like click and then undo. Let's see why it's doing that.
Have I got a weird setting going on here?
Maybe. Oh, sorry about that.
Or did I just see?
Oh, I think you might have some more things selected than you think.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, see, that's why, because you never deselected these guys.
Okay.
So if you just keep shift selecting, it'll just keep adding to the selection. Yeah. So you wanna just kind of right click on these, and then see it'll take away those. So the reason why the direction was off like that,
because it's trying to do it to everything.
yeah, and from a center point between them all, and that's why it was kind of like a weird
It's like,
thing.
whoa, whoa,
But there's a way to do that too. If you got a bunch of things selected, there's a way to locally scale in. But again, that's a little bit more intermediate.
All right. I'm such a beginner.
It's okay.
It's okay. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm inventing where the dots should go. So.
As long as you could read it and you know what it means, I think that's the point of it, right? It's a die.
Exactly.
Alright, so how do you select it?
Let's start faces. Oh, you're good. You're already there.
Yeah.
Just select them. All right. I have all mine done.
You have yours done?
You guys enjoying it so far?
Yeah.
How do I deselect this again?
Control Z.
Control Z.
So everyone got their die kind of laid out so
So
far?
I've
Is anyone
got-
having any trouble?
That's my 6.
Yes?
They're not in the right order. I'll put a 1 in somewhere. And this is my 4.
So let's say this is selected, then
Yeah.
I've got a,
So how do you decide that? This is
okay, so
selected.
it automatically, yeah.
Okay.
Still has some stuff
So
selected.
right now it's still selected. So,
Oh, it is?
but when you click on something else, it'll unselect.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
just make a 1.
So careful with shift clicking stuff. It will select those and it'll try to extrude from a center point of all of them. And that's why it doesn't do the right. So you want to just right click on one here. Well, you don't have to actually unselect them. You can just select the one that you want just by right clicking it by itself. Just right click it. See? And now you can shift. Yeah, I would recommend once you do the 6, you go down to the bottom and you do the 1. And then add up to 7. And then you do the same for all the different sides like that. Oh yes, so it doesn't really matter as long as it's the opposite side of 7. So if you start with 6 on the top, 1 is on the bottom, and then you kind of do whichever number you want on the side. 4.
This is going to be a very odd die.
Right, because you don't have enough.
because I don't have enough spots to do it. I was thinking how clever I was getting exactly 6. How beautiful it looked. You really need 7. Good to know.
Like, just start over.
But I'll never catch up. Which number do I not have yet? That's my 6. I've got more in the wrong place too. So my 1, my 3.
A custom one of a kind dice.
Yeah, they're very custom.
It's a mess.
What number? Oh, 5. I love the way it jumps around.
That's not bad.
What did you say? Control what? To deselect?
Said you can control what it wasn't that hard. Easier to select.
Control what?
I forgot what he did to deselect.
Someone else in this area was. Oh, I see what's going on. Yeah. So let's just see if we can kind of undo first. So I think what you have going on here, you still have these selected. So you were extruding these while you have these selected at the same time. So it's trying to extrude from a weird middle point. So if you want to deselect those, you just right click one of these and I'll shift right click.
Yeah, amazing.
Just right click it. If you shift right click,
Just say it.
it will
Tell me what it
select
is.
the ones that you already had selected. Now it should be good.
Making my dice have a little hiccup.
Yeah, 6 is good.
Giving it a little
Yeah.
dent so it like will always land on the same side.
Well, right click like to unselect the rest of them. And it's like if you just right click something, it basically deselect the direction, just select something select. If you keep shift selecting,
Ah.
it keeps adding to your selection.
I always bring a mouse. I can't stand the trackpad.
Yeah, to save it.
I've lost all control. I've got to deselect this and I'll configure how to do it.
What's the name selected?
I've got this, the point.
Converted.
Ah, I just did that and it stopped. Okay. That's my 5. I'm going to get rid of this 45-degree angle I seem to have on this thing.
With a numpad, yeah. So numpad is you also do press like 1 to numpad. Quick select that. And then 5.
I've got a vertices.
Oh, it doesn't matter where you put it. Basically, later on, you can direct it to where the report packet is from. I just don't know.
Sorry, I'm not using these questions.
That's fine.
I'm trying to.
Where's the lasso object? This one?
Don't get me started.
Yeah, you said how to select everything. The lasso
Oh, yeah.
select.
There are a lot of great tutorials on Blender. That's why I went with Blender.
Okay. There's
Like all the low poly tutorials I've seen.
Is there like a house?
Oh, one day block room.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, plus it's very big too.
Do you ever eat gas?
No, I never heard of it. Oh, okay. I'd say it's more of a depository that they're showing you in bottles. They're selling bottles.
Okay, just tell me where the freaking house is.
Yes, that's what
I'm afraid I'm not touching anything.
Yeah, no, you're
Mine
right.
looks good.
Yes, looks
I'm
good.
not touching anything.
I just want to change my angle so that I'm not looking at this.
Are you a developer? Yeah, that's awesome. That's easy. What? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
With playground? Lead one or?
It would actually compare.
Oh, okay. You really like playground?
Really?
It's got 25 for 3,000 dollars.
You must really
Twice a week.
entire thing.
It's the TV feed.
We'll talk off real quick.
Yeah, because then you can like I can bother you and say, hey, what am I doing wrong?
You know, say, look, mine's perfect.
You know, beauty is in the imperfection. You know, that's a beautiful guy, you know, so imperfect. Okay. That's not what I wanted to do.
Another place in the city that has classes.
That is something else really.
Yeah, that is definitely something else, right?
Yeah. Playground is that.
Well,
Yeah, but my favorite thing is Sam is really totally oriented, so there's a lot of
yeah, why didn't he?
I'm sure it's all
yeah, but why?
Still looking for that frickin'
Right. So like it's probably not like
Yeah, it's just really want to spend all that time.
the last thing.
It's not worth it.
But he did it really fast. I can't remember how he did it.
They offer
Did it show you how many lines there is? Like, is there a counter? Oh, right, you're right.
Okay, cool. So, if your die still isn't quite there yet, that's not a big deal. But we're gonna move on to the next part now, and the next part that we're gonna do is the smoothing of this die. Now, I'm gonna explain like an important concept in 3D. It's just called subdivision surface. So pretty much every like high quality production or any kind of CG, whether it's in film or a game or pretty much anything nowadays uses types of subdivision, which basically what it does is subdivides the object into a finer detail to kind of give it smoothness. So the way that you're going to add subdivision to this cube, to this die that we have going so far, is over here on the right side of the screen. One second. So on the right side of the screen, you're going to click this little wrench icon right here. You see that? This little wrench icon, this should be like right here. Now the wrench is modifiers. So subdivision is what's called a modifier, which is basically modifies the shape of your object. So here where it says add modifier, we're going to click that, and we're going to go down and find subdivision surface. It should be in this second column under generate. So subdivision surface towards the bottom. And you're going to click that, and you're going to see your die start to smooth up like that. Okay? So again, I'm going to show that. So over here, wrench icon, modifier, subdivision, surface. You might notice that it's kind of like still like polygonated. It's kind of like has this, you know, kind of these hard edges and stuff. So to fix that, what we're going to do is, remember when we went to edit mode? So down here on the bottom right, we're going to click object mode again. So we're going to go back to object mode so we can see what our object looks like. It looks like that so far. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to tools in the top left corner. Now again, it has to be in object mode. So in object mode, and then you go to tools, and in here there'll be an option that says shading. You have smooth and you have flat. You see that? So we want smooth. And it'll look like this so far. Still not quite there yet, but now I'm going to show you the magic and how you actually can make this thing look really good. So, and hopefully this will explain a little bit about how subdivisions work as well. So I'm going to click over here on the right. You see here in the subdivision surface, there's like settings. So you can increase the number of subdivisions. You see right here where it says subdivisions and it says view 1. You can click that arrow and go up. Now don't go up too far, you'll crash your computer. Don't go further than like 3. Should be enough. But like, you know, 1 or 2, just so you can kind of see how it procedurally kind of keeps smoothing it. Now, the more you do that, if you just press Z in the viewport, you'll see the transparent view of the outline. And you can see as I'm increasing the subdivisions, I'm also exponentially increasing the amount of detail.
What was that key press?
Z. So Z makes you look wireframe like this. So if you're working in a game engine like Unity, you don't want this. This is a no-no. You have 5 dice in your game and your game's already lagging. What's up?
Yeah, I saw it in the whole drop down there. It looked like there was post-processing.
Yeah, there was.
Things. Can you do this and then basically reduce?
Yes, we're going to be doing that today. Yeah, we're going to be baking, basically, I'll just give you a spoiler. We're going to be baking a high detail dice onto just a regular small cube using normal maps. And then you'll be able to have hundreds of thousands of these cubes, well maybe not hundreds of thousands, but like tens of thousands of these cubes rolling around with no performance hit.
It could work at this level.
You can, while you're designing.
Handles it.
Yeah, while you're designing, no problem. But when you're running in production, you need to like optimize. So I'm going to get out of this Z mode, and I'm actually going to bring my subdivisions down to 1. Where I was in object mode, we're actually going to go back to edit mode now. So we can kind of edit while this subdivision is now on. Now, notice that our cube still has the same amount of cuts and everything, even though we have a subdivision. Now, subdivision only happens after the actual mesh editing. So our mesh is still the same cut cube that we had before. It's just the output is now smoother. Now, watch what happens when I add another edge loop. And we're going to actually want to do this to make the edges, the corners of the die harder. So I'm going to kind of hover around one of the edges here, and I'm going to do Control R, and we're going to have it kind of like clicked in there. Now watch as I bring it closer to the edge. Do you see what's happening? So the edge, the corner is becoming harder. So I'll kind of we can look at it from another angle. I'm going to increase the amount of subdivisions. Now watch. You see that? It's really smooth. See that? And then I create a cut, and see that? You see how I'm hardening the cut? So the way that subdivisions work is basically the more cuts you kind of have in that area, the more detail it kind of does in that specific area. So if you want kind of like close to a hard edge cut, you see how this edge is much harder than this edge. If I look at them like from the front, you see that difference? So that's the difference between this edge kind of moving towards the corner there. The closer you bring it, the harder the edge will be, even though you're still doing smoothing. So we kind of want to go for an effect of a smooth but yet still kind of hard edge, which kind of a die has. Now, it depends on the die, obviously. Some have smooth, but just for demonstration purposes, we're gonna go for this effect. So now what I want you to go ahead is basically cut each of the edges like I just did. So you find an edge that's soft, you cut it like that, you click, and then you bring that cut all the way to the end. Not past the end, but like all the way, like almost at the end. So you're going to need some like that for the, left, right, top edge, bottom edge, and that should pretty much cover all of them, except for now this top side also needs a hard edge here and a hard edge here. So without the subdivision, it should look something like this. You kind of now have a cube that kind of has this kind of edge going on. You see that? On all the edges. And now when you smooth, you're kind of getting that, you see? A nice soft edge, but still a hardish edge or whatever, you know what I mean. So that's one thing. So you can go ahead and do that. And then the next thing that we'll do is we'll make these little circles that we have going on also harder. Because right now they don't look so good, do they? They don't look very circular. If you increase the amount of smoothness, they do look better. But we'll show you how that works. Now again, like, you can always just increase the amount of subdivisions and you'll get a good looking object. But currently we're at 72,000 triangles for one dice.
Where's that number?
It's right here at the top. You have vertices, faces, and triangles, and like the little statistics right there. So that's a lot. It's a lot. Most mobile AR, VR experiences and stuff, you shouldn't be pushing more than 50,000 total for your whole scene. Characters, you could go up to 100,000 triangles, but you pretty much shouldn't go over that or you're gonna lag like a lot. Now most like modern computers can, with like a decent graphics card and stuff, can handle it, no problem. But again, if you're doing like a high detailed environment or something, it'll take its toll. Like a little object, like a dice, just sitting on a table somewhere, it would definitely be too much for it. So what we're gonna do is in the next part, we're actually going to project this extremely high detail 72,000 triangle object onto something like a 500 triangle cube or less even, with a little technique called baking normal maps. So for now, just make your edges nice and hard. Make sure you catch all of them. If you add an extra on or whatever, it's honestly, it's not the end of the world. As long as you're just kind of bringing it towards the edge like that. What's cool about this is that when you're doing the high detail, which is what I like to call this one that we're working on right now, you can cram in as much details as you want. You can go up to, like a million triangles, but don't do it on your computer because it might crash. See, mine is already kind of, not liking it. But if you look at that, you see that? That's a lot. Unnecessary, but you could do it. So when you're working as an artist, as a 3D artist, you can actually cram up the details as much as you want, or as much as your computer can handle. Because what we're going to be doing is we're basically going to be baking this onto a low detail. So as an artist, you kind of cram up the details, add all the little stuff, and then later you bake it into a low detailed mesh with a nice normal map, and then you'll get all these smooth edges and cool features onto a couple hundred triangles. So yeah, let me know when you have it cut like this. Again, if you need a little refresher on how to cut, you press Control R, and then you move your mouse around and you find the edge that you want to cut. You click, and then you pull, and you adjust, and then you click again to save.
What if I want one of my holes to be deeper? Can I go back and make?
You can select the face of your hole,
Yeah.
and then move it in more. Or out, if you want to get funky with it. Make sure you're moving only in the axes that you want. So if it's this way, make sure you're pulling, by that arrow, whatever. So you don't pull it kind of in a weird way.
Yeah. Thank you.
But you can see now that the smoothing is on, you can see that the smoothing is updates in real time as you're adjusting your object. So you can make a very abstract dice. Probably wouldn't work too well. Wouldn't fall right.
Said redo is Control C. Redo,
Control Shift Z.
Control Shift C.
Yeah. You can also always, in Blender, there's a quick keyboard shortcut. You just press space, and it'll open this quick search bar, and you could type something like redo, and then it'll show you redo, and it'll also show you the keyboard shortcut for redo. So if there's ever, and I do this all the time, like if I don't remember a command, like edge loop, or actually what is this command that we're using called? It's called ring. Oh. What's it called? It's called these are called edge loops, but what's it called? It's called like cut something. Loop cut. That's what it's called. So it's called a loop cut and slide. So, if you just want to, get a reminder what's loop cut, you can just press space, start searching for it, and there it is. And you can activate the command just by clicking it right here, or it also shows you the keyboard shortcut for it right next to it there. So pretty much anything in Blender works like that. If you don't remember what extrude is, you can press space, start typing extrude, and then there's a bunch of extrude functions here. Too many, actually. But, yeah. So that's another really cool feature in Blender, is this kind of quick search feature for actions. So once you kind of have your cube with these nice hard edges, we are pretty much kind of done with our high detail, right? I mean, when you put the subdivisions up to 3 at least, that looks pretty good, right? We got nice smooth edges, and we got nice circular holes. So now the next thing that we want to do is we want to project this high detail die onto a low detail. How do we do that? Now, this part might be a little bit tricky, but make sure that your cube is in this 0, 0, 0 location, and that its rotation is 0, 0, 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, in object mode, so we're not in edit mode now. Now we're back in object mode. I'm going to create another cube. So the way that I do that is I'm just going to press space, my little search bar thing. I'm going to do add cube. Just type it out. And that works for everything else. Add sphere, add cylinder, etc. So add a cube. Now we have a nice basic cube right there.
Wait, can you do that one more time? Can you do the add cube one more time?
Just press space.
Okay, yeah.
And then just type add cube. And then click it. So now this cube, same thing. We're going to click it, like right click it, and then go to its location settings here, and we're going to make it all 0, 0, 0. So it's right on top of our high detail cube. Like I said, this part might be a little tricky, especially kind of if you moved your cube around somewhere weird. But if you just select both objects and make sure that their positions are all 0, 0, 0, and that their scales are all 1, 1, 1, and that their rotations are all also 0, 0, 0, you should pretty much be seeing this exact same thing. It's basically like both cubes kind of right on top of each other. And to deselect it, I could just right click here in the hierarchy or the outliner and click deselect. Take off the subdivision off.
I've got a very artsy looking guy going
Oh, got it. Thank you.
everyone's going to like that. Hey Maggie, you know that guy who's making that
And then I click on this one.
You see, I have it here, the transform location.
Oh, I see. Alright, so I
Everyone, make sure you're in object mode.
No, we're doing great. I didn't
Oh, wow,
do
look
enough
at that. What
cuts
the
in
hell?
my, I only did 5 cuts instead of
Wow, that is not right.
you know, it's just that I, way back at the beginning, I thought I'd done 6 cuts, but I didn't do 5. So I didn't have the extra space to, so I didn't want to go back and start over. It's fine. I think it's brilliant. Oh,
Better if you have a table.
yeah, you have to come early to get a table.
And a mouse.
And a mouse, which I happen to have, but it's not necessarily right. Just getting used to getting around this thing. I'm never going to remember half of these.
I didn't understand what that thing was.
Yours looks pretty good.
It just toggled between object and edit. Yeah.
How many,
It's a real part of the song.
oh, I see. If I up Now you can actually see where all my holes are. But I limited them so that they wouldn't. I upped the number my views, my subdivisions. And now it looks more like yours, but I kept mine down because I didn't want to crash the computer. His is that. Yours is yeah, and he's got 72,000. Here I've only got 4,000.
Maybe you see the 72.
Right on the header. Birds, faces, tries. Tries is the like on one subdivision I've only got 4,000. But on two it jumps up to 16,000.
Okay.
I'm not even going to go to 3.
Alright, so everyone should have their cube kind of in the same place. Now, if you don't, no biggie. You know, again, like everything will be up on YouTube later and you can follow it. You also have the asset that you can kind of, you know, see kind of how it was made. But one important thing that we want to do with this cube here is we actually want to prepare it to basically become our container for all the high details. Now, we could actually completely project onto one of these, but there will be some slight errors, and you'll actually see how this works, right? So your cubes should be just like this, right on top of each other. So now what I want you to do is I want you to grab, and now I'm going to move this up if you guys don't see this part of the screen. Move up this part of the viewport, this timeline. You could kind of grab this edge and kind of just make it bigger like this to kind of make another side of the program for yourself there. Just like that. And then in the bottom left, where this little clock icon is for a timeline, we're going to switch this from a timeline to a UV image editor. So everything in Blender, each of these panels could become another panel. And that's kind of how you switch, is basically that bottom left icon. So you should have now kind of this checkerboard grid here, not checkerboard, but just this grid. And your 3D object above. Now, make sure you have your low detail cube selected, and the way that you make sure about that is over here on the right, you see the name that's selected. The second cube should probably be like cube 001 or something like that. So while having that selected, you go into edit mode, and then over here on the left, maybe if you don't have enough room here, you can make this UV editor smaller. You're going to go to this folder tab called Shading and UVs. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically UV map our cube right now. That's what it's called in 3D. So UV mapping is basically we're going to unwrap this 3D object onto a 2D plane. Almost like if you were doing like, you know, arts and crafts and you kind of needed to like kind of stick a bunch of like, you know, stuff onto like a 3D cube or something like that. So just picture it like it's gonna basically unwrap like so. We're gonna go over here on this folder tab where it says Shading and UVs while in edit mode, while having our low detail cube selected, and here where it says UV mapping unwrap, we're gonna use the drop down and we're gonna select Smart UV Project. Click that, and then you'll have a few settings here. It's all good, and just press OK. And you should get something like this here on the bottom. Smart UV Project. And what that just did is it basically unwrapped the 6 sides of the cube onto a 2D plane. Now, when you see this is a little bit of a step-by-step process, but the result is really cool. Over here on the bottom, again, I'm going to move this up if you don't see it on the projector. On the bottom here, they should say New. You see like almost like a little image icon and New. You're going to click New. And then it's going to say New Image. And then you can change the name of this image. to something like cube or dice normal, actually. Keep calling it a cube. So dice normal, the width and the height is fine for now, and you can press OK. And now you should see that bottom part will turn black like this, because what we just did was we generated a blank black texture for what's going to basically be the container for the normal map details. So now there's only one more step left. We pretty much prepared our low detail cube. It's ready to go. We're going to go back to object mode. Okay. Now, I want you to right click on these both cubes again to kind of get to the high detail cube, and you can tell it's high detail by all the little subdivisions that show up. And then I want you to shift right click again to select the second cube. So it will select both of them like that. Important though is that first you select the high detail, then you select the low detail. So just kind of keep clicking it until you first get to this one. Once you get to this one, then you hold shift and you right click again, and you've selected now both of them.
So that order matters?
It matters, yes. So first the high detail, then the low detail.
Is there a way to do it from the outline?
You can do it from the outliner, kind of. Yeah, you could left click on the outliner and also do that as well.
I can't seem to get it. It just switched.
You got it. You're good. It doesn't switch. You got it. If it's like red like that, then you're good. Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. That's good. If it's red like this, then it's good. That means both are selected.
Even though on the right here it's only got the second.
Yeah, you see the other one is also kind of highlighted.
Okay.
Kind of has the little, I know it's a little weird, but you do have them both selected.
Okay. All right.
So now we're going to go to render settings over here on the left. So where you have actually on the right panel where you had the wrench, remember? You're going to pick the top left, the leftmost icon on the right side is this little like camera icon. It's almost like a little photography camera thing to go into the render settings. Okay? Everyone find that? It's right here. You're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page. And at the bottom there will be a little nav there called bake. Right here. You see bake? You're going to expand bake. And you're going to scroll down. And then right there it says full render right now. We're going to replace full render with normals. So again, over here in this icon, click the little camera icon to go into render settings. Scroll all the way down, get to bake, expand bake, and then bake mode, make it normals. The last important thing to check is right here, selected to active. You see that? And what that basically means is we're going to project the normal maps of the high detail object onto the low detail object. So selected to active, and then once all that's set, click bake. And there we go. And you should get this. Now, if you've used Unity before or you know 3D, you know what that is, right? That's a normal map. So we've basically baked those 70,000 triangles into a tiny JPEG. It's maybe like 50 kilobytes or something. Okay? So then if you got this, save it. So the way that you save it is you go here to image, right at the bottom left right here, image, save as image, and then save it to your desktop somewhere. Just like that. And now it's saved, and we got it.
The file save?
No, the image right here, save as image, yeah. Yeah, you want to save this specific baked out result. So I'll make sure everyone's got that. Again, if you don't, There's no big. It's not a big deal. You kind of follow along the steps. Yes, it seems like some of them were
Oh, I was
they were maybe.
positioning and I grabbed it.
Yeah, maybe you grabbed it. Yes, yeah.
So I did that.
It's fine. It's cool.
No, no, I was
Because we're actually gonna paint over that anyway with black.
Okay.
Yeah, again, like he didn't get that exact
There's
result.
one there, yeah. I kind of like this style. It's almost like there's no smooth, or the smoothing is different.
Oh yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't do the you need the it had to be unwrapped first.
Yeah, I did unwrap it.
I know, that's why I said, unless you do this every day, you never do any.
I forgot how we did it.
But it's good to
It was like
understand the
he
process
did the render
of the slicing of everything and the extrusion to get to more than something.
Yeah, my cube normal.
The surface. What I'm asking is when you're doing extruding, is it possible to control the exact amount so all your depths look the same?
Yeah, don't do
Must
big
be a
fucking
way.
red.
Yeah, just like it was just hit or miss whether I got them deep enough or not. I really could use a drink right now. I'm so hot. That's the problem with that pizza.
yeah, the shoes really.
Yeah.
Just listen to the music.
Yeah. Because it's resident. All the details, yeah. Yeah.
Like the yeah, there were the 6 black squares here first.
Oh, yeah, true. You're like a tiny little. You make it really, yeah, you gotta simplify it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, thanks. So I have this, and then what I did was I selected the high poly one first, and then the low poly. Right, so the grid is gone.
Yep.
And then I select under bake, I select normal, I check off select
This is going to be
to active, and when I click bake,
say it's going to be better than
so I'm just gonna undo it.
It'll be hard to remember everything. Be a way to remember everything. To review it
did.
because there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I read the heck out of it.
If you move them, they go smooth.
So you can use the
Yeah.
No, no. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, this is more.
So I think that feels like
The pipe power, right? Pipe power.
After a while, then you get to feel like it's real slug. It's very sluggish. So I have to start building things.
Yeah, if we could say no objects or injections.
Well, actually, you import it to Unity.
No, so
Oh, in his package.
I use this. I just got this. They just got that. So I didn't
You see this guy? Yeah.
Whatever you have, whatever details you have,
Amazing. That makes a 5. And this makes a 6.
now. Let's save as
It should be like this. Now check out the prawns. That's the prawn. It's a prawn. Sorry?
yes.
What are you
Select high detail, low detail. Then the big trigger. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Scroll all the way down.
Yeah, the new one it was.
That's a lost.
Select it to accurate.
Are you saying it's good for
Oh yeah,
Oh, go backwards. So you can edit it further, yeah?
Oh yeah, it's gonna be good.
This is how the floor, how we made the floor. Check this out.
High details.
Yes. That would be great. Right now it's just surface.
Now shit out of the box. Now. Then save it.
it's not for like
Sorry, this is gonna be the last one though, because I need to move on. But again, everything is gonna be on YouTube later. So where's your other cube? No, you didn't make one. You made one and then that's all the cube is probably
Yeah, he was. I was like this. Right after that.
Hi everybody, I'm teaching a class. I'm joking.
Yeah, did you do this part? Okay.
Sorry.
So
What's up? Question. It's not baking. I don't know why.
I know this is like one of the most common things. So you have to make sure that you're in object mode, and you have to first select the high detail, and then you shift select the low detail, red like that, then bake. And no objects or images, the same thing someone else was having. Make another image.
I like. Whoa. Oh my. Hey, that's the canvas. Look.
Yeah.
Make a nice roll. Make a nice That's the canvas.
Sorry.
Dude, it looks
That's alright, some of the people are doing the same thing. Oh. Add the image to bake to. I don't know.
Could it really be there?
Someone else had another thing. They had like the wrong renderer on. Well, you seem to have everything. Can you revert?
Yeah, I don't know how.
I don't know. You don't think you put some settings somewhere?
No, this is their fresh install.
You don't pay it.
Try one more time.
You mean only you only get charged 6 seconds?
I have no idea what it is about.
That's right. Thanks.
Sorry about that. Okay. High detail first, then the low detail. So yeah, so if you're having like some problems like no active image found to bake to or something like that, one or two of the steps might have gone wrong. I'm sorry about that if for some people it isn't working. It's a little tricky to just make sure it's the same on everyone's computer, but you know I'm not going anywhere for a little bit anyway, so I don't know how your guys' schedule is. But basically, what I want to do next is I want to show you how this goes into Unity. So it's fairly simple. Save your file. So over here in the top left, you're gonna go to File, Save As. So this baking thing, I guess since I had a bunch of people that were having trouble with that, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna post up like an example file that just shows that part. And hopefully that will kind of show you how to do it. And I'll have like the high detail dice and the low detail dice ready, and maybe that should work. If even then it doesn't work and it's the same file, then maybe it's something's configured now right. But I would like to get to the bottom of why some people are having like the same error. But basically, save your file to the desktop somewhere. Call it something like dice. So this is your current file that has both the high detail and the low detail, and this will be good to see in Unity what that actually looks like. So once you have that saved, also make sure you have your normal map saved, which is here, image, save as image, so make sure that's been done. And then the last thing, and this is just so you don't lose this normal map if you open this file again, you go to File, and then here it says External Data. You can do automatically pack into Blend, which basically takes any textures, any external stuff, and it just packs it into this one file. This isn't a necessary step though, but you know, it's good. And then you can save again. So once you have that done, on your desktop, so I'm gonna close this.
What format is the file?
It's just a blend file right now.
Blend file?
Yep, and if you have Blender installed on your computer, blend files will load into Unity just like that, just drag and drop. But you can export FBX from Unity, from Blender.
Recognized by other,
Some, yeah, but again, you can export from Blender as FBX. You go to File, Export, and then there's other file types that are more widely used.
what's the most widely used?
FBX probably. So yeah, so in Unity, if you have this scene open, that's cool. If you don't, you know, you can make a new one. It's fine. But I'm just gonna load something into this scene, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my dice blend file, and if you don't have Unity installed right now or ready to go, that's fine too. And I'm basically gonna drag this dice blend file into Unity. It'll do its thing. There it is. So then I'm gonna pull this dice cube file into my scene. There it is. Okay. Now this dice cube is made of two objects, of the high detail and the low detail. So if you expand it, you pull them apart. So this is the high detail, the one with a lot of polygons, and this is just a basic cube, right? Pull in the normal map from your desktop that you made earlier into Unity. There's our normal map. And then what I can do is I can create a new material, right click, create material, call it something like dice. And then I'm going to take this dice normal and I'm going to pull it into the normal slot. It's going to say this texture is not marked as a normal map. Fix now. Click the fix now. And now your material is ready to go. I pulled the material on and there it is. See that?
Can you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
From dragging over the.
drag both files in, so your blend file and your normal map file, into Unity. You should see them in there. What I basically did was, because the cubes are right on top of each other, there's two cubes. Once you pull it in to the scene, you can expand this object right here. And in there, there should be two objects. So it should be your low detail and your high detail cube. Pull them apart so you can see them next to each other like this. Okay. And then you're going to create a new material in Unity. So the way you do that is you right click somewhere in the project view here, create, and then in there should be material. So yeah, so right click, create, material. And then in that, once you click that material, over here on the right, you can see normal map is one of the options. You can click that little circle icon there where it says normal map, and it'll show you all of the images you have in the project. You know, that might be a little confusing because there's the dice from my project earlier too is there. So you can always just drag and drop the normal. So you basically drag this asset from here and then into here, like that. And then now that new material that you just made, you could drag it onto your object. Now if you look at the wireframe here, just by clicking shaded here, you can see the difference in detail. You see that? So that's our high detail cube. That's our low detail cube, but they look pretty much the same. They react to lighting. So if you rotate the light, you can see that the shadows and the light react onto our normal map cube almost identically to our regular cube. So, bless you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a way to, as you get more advanced into this, the one thing you notice is that the shadow detail is like so much more pronounced in high detail than in the low detail. Is there ways to compensate that in the low detail to give you?
You can kind of bump up the amount of normal here. It's also kind of the lighting that I kind of have set up, but in reality, this is like a deeper hole where this is kind of like a fake hole. There's other things you can do, like the thing is with this one, I ended up just coloring the insides anyway, so you don't really actually see it, but you could always kind of just do stuff in post and make the hole deeper if you want to kind of like adjust for it. So if you're really going for a certain amount of depth or whatever, you could kind of try to kind of play it off, try to kind of do it in post. But there are a few different ways you could do it to make it darker.
Kind of optimizing the low detail model after the fact.
Yep, but in reality, it will always be slightly like less quality than the high detail with the 70,000 triangles. But the thing is, this thing, you're probably never gonna see it from that close up anyway. It'll be like, it'll be kind of far usually, or I mean, if it's not even that far, but still, it's pretty hard to tell if you've never seen this other one as a comparison.
Do people do things like, I know, from a video background, so I was going to deal with something that was 4K versus 480p. One strategy I would have would be probably bump up the contrast of the 480p. Are there things like reflectiveness of the surface or whatever that you can do to
Yeah, there's a lot of settings here you could tweak in Unity, like the smoothness of it and stuff, and the color of it.
to kind of get back an illusion of more detail?
Yep. You also, when we baked our normal map, we baked like only like a 1024 by 1024 JPEG, or we could have baked like a 4K texture, for example, if we wanted to, and then it would have looked, it would have looked better. It would have taken longer to bake. But yeah, when you're working in production, you'll bake like the highest level textures that you can, pretty much, and then you can do a lot of stuff in post too. So
Doesn't that defeat the purpose of the smaller file size?
well, it's still going to be a lot smaller and less performance than the 70,000 triangles. It's not so much the file size as much as the eating up your graphics card. If you got like these really high detail objects, they really eat it up really fast. So the last thing that we need to do to finish this die, and if some of you don't have Photoshop installed and stuff, that's it's not the end of the world. You don't have to follow this part, but I'll just kind of show you what I do here to basically color in these holes to make them black, like on my die here. And that's like in post, I guess, is I would just right click this normal that I just made, show in Explorer or show in Finder. I pull up Adobe Photoshop. If you're gonna ever want to get into doing 3D design or computer generated imagery of any sort or whatever, you should probably be pretty comfortable with using Photoshop, or at least know the basics. And I would pull in this normal map like that, and then I'm just gonna do something simple like just make a circle right here like that, make a new layer, and color it in like that. And now this is the part where it can get a little tedious, but some people might ask, like, is there like an automatic way to do this? There could be ways you could speed it up, like I could merge these three and then the next 3 rows I could just pull them in like that. But if you're looking for a fully automatic way to do this, there probably isn't one. You're probably gonna look longer than it would take to just do it. Yep. So I should have probably kept one of the circles so I could keep duplicating it. But that's basically kind of how it works. Now this takes like a couple of minutes to just fill them in, but you'll see the effect that it gives is quite nice once you're done with it. So you kind of go ahead and just do that.
Can you make a brush that's the size of the hole and then just brush it with a pen?
Yeah, you could do that. That is a faster way to do it. No problem. So let's just do that then. But it's like, I feel like if I have it like this, I can kind of nudge it and stuff. If you use a brush, you might not fully like have it how you want it. It's just me. Almost. Do. But yeah, I think I mean, because I was a Blender beginner at some point too. The hardest thing to get used to is the interface. Once you get over like the interface and navigating around, rotating, scaling, moving, the difference between edit mode and object mode and that kind of stuff, you're pretty much almost there. You can almost do anything you want then. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to merge all of these, and then I want to make a new layer. I'm going to put that layer underneath it, do a full selection, and just color white like that. And then that's what I'm going to call my diffuse texture. So I'm going to file, save as, and I'm going to call this one dice diffuse. Like that. Another small 50 kilobyte texture. There's my dice diffuse. And then in my material, I'll pull that in like that. There it is. So now we ran out of time. It's honestly like, you know, we're not really usually like strict on the end time anyway. 9 o'clock isn't like a hard cutoff, but I know some people have things that they have to do and stuff. But if you do stick around, I will show you how to do a brief pawn based on reference, just on the little stuff that we did so far. Shouldn't take me more than like 15 minutes or so. But for the rest of you that enjoyed it, and I was like, I had enough Blender for tonight. Thank you for coming. I am going to be scheduling another Blender class probably either next month or maybe before that. And we're going to probably cover some more intermediate stuff. It's probably going to be a little bit of a smaller class, so it'll be more hands-on and stuff. If it's your first time in the meetup or joining the group, welcome. You know, just if you're subscribed and you're on Meetup, you'll find out when the next ones are. Some people asked if there's going to be like a Blender weekend, like paid course, stuff like that. If someone is interested in that, let me know your schedule for April, because we do plan on hosting like a weekend boot camp for Blender. Most likely it will be towards the end of April. So if some people are interested in that and they say like, you know, end of April sounds good for me, don't hesitate to let me know. Those class sizes are typically very small and hands-on, like 5 people. But so far, nothing scheduled at the moment. But there are plans for some classes in end of April. But yeah, I mean, without further ado, for those that are leaving, thank you for coming. For those that are staying, I am going to make a pawn.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, man.
Enjoy. Have a good night. So I'm just gonna Google pawn and get like a nice reference image for myself here. I think this pawn's good. So I'll grab this pawn. If you go ahead and grab that same pawn, that works too. And we're just gonna do this real quick, and you're gonna see how simple it is. I'm just gonna do a new reload startup file. Start from the beginning. The first thing that you do is over here on the right side, you expand this area. You go down to background images. You check that on, and you add image. Open. Then I'm going to go to my desktop again, click my thumbnails here, and there's my pawn image. And you might not see anything just yet, but if you have the background image loaded, what you have to do is, if you have a numpad, you should press something like 1 to go front. If you don't have a numpad, in your user preferences, if you have that 3D navigation add-on right here, you can just click here where it says display. You can click front, and then you can click right here where it says view perspective orthographic. You click that, and now we're in what's called orthographic view, which gives us a nice like architectural projection with no perspective, and then we're able to just kind of basically trace this pawn around. So the way that you start this is, I actually am not using the cube for this. So I'm going to click that cube, right click it actually, and delete it. So if you're on a Mac, you might have to do FN delete. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press space, and I'm going to type add cylinder. So you're actually starting with a cylinder for this one.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
What do you delete?
If you're on a Mac, FN delete.
Or you can press X then
Or that.
X. Oh.
So you should kind of have something like this so far. So now I'm going to move this down like so. Kind of try to center it here. That should be fine. It doesn't have to be like a perfect center. It's a reference. So we're kind of going to try to mimic it basically. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to grab in faces. So I'm going to select faces over here in edit mode. Select this top face. Go back to my front projection again and move this down here. Now I'm going to press Z to make it all transparent so I could see through it and see what I'm doing. To select all the faces at once, press A. So if you press A again, it will deselect all the faces. If you press A, it selects all of them. S to scale, you scale it up, something like that. And I'm going to move it up so it's right at the kind of the base like that, following the reference. This image, the perspective is a little weird, so the left and the right side aren't like exact. So I'm actually just going to follow the right side of this reference. And then I'm going to scroll like this, grab this top, put myself back in the front, and move this to this part here, like so. Now I'm going to scale just that part, and here we go. We start like this. Then from here, I'm going to press E to extrude, and then I'm going to scale like this. And then I'm going to extrude again, scale like that, extrude again, scale like that. Here we go, another extrude, scale in one more. Here's another one. And you kind of keep going, trying to follow the reference as close as you can. Just like that. Do another one. Scale out like a saucer like that. Here's another one. Boom. Short little neck. And there we are.
Wow, amazing.
You go over to Tools here and Smooth. Step 1. Step 2, go to Modifiers Add modifier, subdivision surface. Subdivide it, nice and smooth. You might get this like what I like to call sausage effect on the bottom. And the reason it does that is because this face, it's an n-gon. It's like a, or whatever they like to call it. It's basically like a very, very many-edged like polygon, which is not like good 3D. 3D is all triangles and quads. So you actually want to delete this guy.
Is that a face that you're
Yeah, it's like a giant like 32-sided face. That's where you get that weird like sausage effect when it tries to smooth it. So selecting edges and then Alt right click this to select what's called the edge loop. Press space and then type grid fill. So I'm going to fill it with the grid like that. So that's much better than that n-gon or whatever was going on. And now if I look in object mode, it doesn't have that sausage effect anymore. Looks good. Top still has the sausage effect, but we actually don't need the top because the top will have a sphere. So I can actually delete this here like that. I can go add in edit mode because I want it to be all part of the same object. So space, add UV sphere. It's like inside there. I'm going to move it up. Look at my reference. Scale it. Smooth it. Okay. And now the last thing is, see, so ever since I smoothed it, it's not following the reference anymore as it should. So if I go into edit mode, all I have to do is add some more cuts here to make these edges harder. See that, what I'm doing? So as I'm cutting around these edges, they're becoming more precise and following my original intent. So this is supposed to be kind of smoothed like that. This part I think has to be a little hard. This part too should be a little bit harder. And then this kind of neck area here should be a little hard. This one too. And then this one right here, something like that. And then we should get something like this. A nice kind of like smoothed pawn shape, basically. And then we're going to do the same exact technique that we did before, except this time, since we already kind of have this object, I'm actually just going to duplicate it. And the way that I do that is Shift D for duplicate. And now I have two of them. The second one, I'm going to remove this subdivision modifier. So now you have a high detail and a low detail, like that.
How do you delete the subdivision modifier?
Just there's like a there's like an X right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when you duplicate it along with the modifier. And then I'm gonna just hide my high detail just by clicking the little eye icon right here to hide it. So I want to work with the low detail right now at this moment. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up this part down here again, make it a UV image editor. Go into edit mode, select all the faces by pressing A, like that a couple times to make sure they're all selected. Go into shading and UVs, unwrap, smart UV project. The angle limit, I'm going to heighten it because I'll show you why. If you make the angle limit kind of little, some of the parts are kind of going to come segmented like that. So I'm actually going to make the angle limit to the maximum, which is 89 degrees. And I should get something like this, which is still not perfect, but it'll still work. Gonna create a new normal map texture. Call it pawn normal or something like that. Press OK. And that should be pretty much ready to go. Then all I have to do is go to object mode. I'm gonna show my high detail again by pressing the little eye icon next to it. Select the high detail. Select the low detail, go to my render settings, scroll all the way down, bake, normals, select it to active, and then click bake. and I should get something like this. Now, since I kind of have a little experience with this, so I can actually eye these normal maps out and know if some parts aren't so good. I believe with the pawn, you have to put the distance to like 0.1 or something like that for some of the areas to show up more properly. But other than that, that should pretty much cover most of the details. Go to image, save as image, desktop, saved. I got my normal map. Then I'll take my pawn, I'll save this file, save as, call it like something like pawn. Oops. Minimize, back to Unity. So these are the cubes I was making earlier. I'll get rid of this one actually. I'm gonna pull in my pawn. Same thing, one of the pawns is like, you know, way too many polygons, like 47,000. And the other one is much, much less. So here they are. They're both on top of each other. So I'm just going to separate them. One is high, one is low. I think it's just the lighting is like fooling you a little bit. But it's actually, should be the same. So this is the high, this is the low. You know, it's already is kind of hard to tell the difference. And I noticed this with the pawn earlier when I was doing it. The normal map does not like make it look that different. Oops, not that. So if I make it 0, you see that? Only really like for some of the hard cuts are you really noticing if there is a normal map or not. But you might want those hard cuts, you know? So, but I already kind of hard cut it and made it look, oh yeah, oops, sorry. I know why they're looking exactly the same. Wait a second. Wait a second. No, that is weird. They definitely are like pretty close to each other. But one is...
bring in both of them?
It's just for demonstration purposes.
But normally you just bring in
Normally I would delete the high detail and don't need it anymore. But if you look at the wireframe, you can see that you see the difference in detail. And then yeah, same thing. Put the pawn normal in here. Make a new material. Pawn. Put the normal map on it. Fix. And then put it on here. And then there it is. The reason it's white like that, it's just like the default material. Makes it a little whiter. But that's basically it. And then from here, you could kind of have some fun with it. Make it a little shiny. You know, make it kind of do whatever you want it to do.
Is that like a best practice for importing stuff?
Drag and drop is fine. You can always right click and import new asset, which brings up the file explorer.
And when you're working with 3D assets, you should always do like the lowest version and then create that 3D map.
Oh, well, yeah, like when you're importing stuff into your project and you're already done with it, you should only really keep the high detail for yourself, for your own like assets.
Yeah, okay.
But in Unity, in your final production, all you really need is the low details in there.
And then the material.
And that's pretty much it. The only last thing is this dice that I had here. I explained it like at the beginning of the class, how I did the 6 sides and how it actually counts the die and how that works. So basically what I did was I just grabbed my dice. I'm going to put my roll dice script on it. The roll dice script already puts a mesh collider on it. I make it convex. It has a rigid body. It's pretty much just ready to be clicked. I'll move it like into view. And then all I did was I basically created a bunch of cubes, like placeholders like this. Grab a few of these cubes, make them tinier, like, you know, like 0.5 or something like that. Doesn't really matter. And then I place it so on top of here, and I name this cube 6 because this is on top of 6. And I'll actually pull that. So this is my dice right here. So I'll pull that 6 inside and parent it together here. And then I'll do the same thing for each side. I'll take this cube, put it down here. Now this is called 3. I'll take another clone of it. This is called 2. Take another clone of it. This is called 4. 2 more left. This one is called 5. And then one on the bottom. This is called 1. And now inside the die, it has 6 child game objects. Each one is numbered according to the side that it's on. My script, I'll just give you a glance at it, but you could always just, download the package right here. So if you take a look at my script, basically what happens is, I'll break this down. So on mouse down, which is when you click the object, run the function roll. Roll makes the velocity of the object 15 in the y-axis and the angular velocity random in each direction, which makes this jump and spin. And then rolling is equal to true. If rolling is equal to true, and if the velocity magnitude is 0, meaning if the cube stopped rolling, calculate result. Calculate result takes all the child objects for each transform t in transform, which is our dice. If biggest is equal to null, so if we don't have one set yet, biggest is equal to the first one. Else, if the position of the current object's y is bigger than the last biggest's y, then that's the biggest now. And it'll keep going until it finds the final top facing side. And then all it does is string text is equal to dice rolled biggest dot name. So dice rolled 6 or dice rolled 2 or whatever. And then rolling is equal to false. And the way that looks is, so I'm going to just hide all these objects. Here's my die. Maximize on play. Oh yeah, one more thing. I have to take my UI text, which says click on dice to roll. And I have to just reference it right here in my script. UI text. Press play. And click it. And there it goes. 3. Dice rolled 3. And it knows. It knows which side it lands on. Because there can only be one side that's tallest, which is the side that is tallest. I don't know what I was trying to say with that. But yeah. So it just does like a random rotational velocity and upwards. And there you go, 5. And then technically what you would then do is you would make this pawn, move 5 spaces or, whatever you want to do. But yeah, I mean, the Unity side of it and the rolling the dice, I just kind of wanted to show that you can bring this in and actually it's useful. You could do something cool with it. It is just a Blender class though, so, we're not going to go too deep into the coding right now. But the code is up there and you could read it if you want. But yeah, that pretty much concludes Blender for beginners. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yep. And we'll have this up on YouTube, and I'll post it on the I'll post it on the Meetup page so you guys can check out the video.
When will you know that you're going to do the April weekend?
I will post about it up on the Meetup. I'll probably know by next week.
Okay. I think I could do